Just south of Montgomery, Alabama, lies one of the most polluted creeks in the state. Believe it or not, everything you see was once part of the ocean, rich with plant and animal life alike. You might recognize the megalodon, a 60-ton, 60-foot-long, ferocious predator that ruled the seas millions of years ago. This massive predator is a relative of Cretalamna bryanti, more commonly known as the fossil shark. While C. bryanti was only 1/10 the size of the great megalodon, he was still quite the predator, eating fish and small mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, some of which were nearly his size. To find out more about this 9 to 12-foot ancient shark, our team traveled to Catoma Creek, one of C. bryanti's primary hunting grounds during the late Cretaceous period. It was there we met up with fish and fossil expert Dr. John Armbruster, who further enlightened us about this magnificent creature and its habitat all those years ago.
So, when this was the Cretaceous, this area was a shallow sea. And that shallow sea had a lot of sedimentation, and that's what preserved a lot of the fossils here, is because of that area of deposition. That's why we got a lot of fossils from this particular area. This whole area was its hunting grounds. Shallow bays, shallow seas are very rich with all of these oysters here. That means there's lots of habitat for fishes and other invertebrates, and was just a nice feeding ground for something like a mosasaur or a shark or an ammonite.
While the fossil searching took quite some time, we were able to find a few teeth that indeed belonged to the Bryant shark. Sharks have several rows of teeth, which are constantly being lost and replaced with new ones. Consequently, those lost teeth are scattered and eventually fossilized across a large span of ocean. In southeast Alabama, not only can you find teeth belonging to the Bryant shark, but also to those of other shark species. These teeth are much smaller in size compared to the Bryant shark.
So what we saw here today was that most of the fossils were hard-bodied organisms, mostly things like echinoderms and oysters, because those things are things that fossilize really, really well. Those hard shells are pretty impervious and can last for a very long time before they dissolve away. And that's important because if an animal dies and dissolves away, we're not going to get a fossil of it. We see shark teeth because shark teeth are pretty hard. The rest of the shark skeleton is pretty rare in the fossil record because it's made out of cartilage, and that cartilage dissolves very rapidly. So we don't have a lot of shark skeletons out there, but we do have a lot of shark teeth because they're hard and they're replaced constantly, so we have many of them out there. So it wasn't that a shark died here and found the teeth, left the teeth that we found. It was that likely that shark bit into something, chewed it up, tooth fell out, and we've discovered the tooth afterwards.
Well, it is quite incredible just how different this area used to be millions of years ago. In fact, C. bryanti was not the only predator in the area. Fossils of other major Cretaceous predators can be found in the creek bed as well. After discovering the shell of an ammonite, Dr. Armbruster elaborated more on C. bryanti's fellow predators.
What has been found here in terms of large predators include the sharks, but also things like ammonites. And we saw a few ammonite fossils here today. They're not very well preserved here, but an ammonite was basically a squid on the half shell. So it had a shell that it lived inside of. And there were a couple of different types of them. Some were long and pointy, cone-shaped shells, and some were curlicues, and we saw some of the curlicues here. That was another major predator. What has also been found here a lot are mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, and usually it's bits and pieces of them, but around this area there are some decent large fossils of mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, and they were actually relatives of modern lizards and were purely aquatic and were another top-end predator.
What is particularly interesting about the fossil shark is that while its species is presumed extinct, most of its lineage is extant, meaning that many of its relatives are still alive today. One of the more famous members of its lineage are mackerel sharks, which share the same order as the fossil shark.
The sharks that we have today aren't that much different from the sharks that were around at this time. In fact, there are some groups that are still alive here, like goblin sharks are still around. And so this particular shark was probably a top-end aquatic predator, just like our modern sharks. It's probably a fairly large-bodied shark. Ate everything from small fishes up to small plesiosaurs and mosasaurs. We know that the Cretaceous ended with an asteroid impact around the Yucatan about 65 million years ago. But the fate of all organisms is to go extinct. And there are many and varied reasons why that happens. And sometimes they just evolve into other things. Sometimes the species does actually go extinct. And there's many different reasons, and perhaps that Cretaceous event, that asteroid impact could have harmed them, but it was mostly a problem for terrestrial organisms. And what we do know is that most families of organisms that we see alive today actually do date back to the late Cretaceous. There's a lot of different organisms that date back to the late Cretaceous, including primates.
While scientists like Dr. Armbruster know quite a bit about this species, its origins and evolutionary history are still a bit of a mystery. Lucky for you, anyone can fossil hunt. And here are a few tips to guide your exploration.
In the state of Alabama, it's not illegal to pick up fossils if you are on public land, preferably not state land, but you can go fossil hunting. And there are great organizations like the Alabama Paleontological Society that can help you and take you out on various digs in various places. What you do have to do is be respectful of what is there. If you see something that's really, really odd, really maybe important, please do contact a scientist.
So it's up to you to investigate more about this species and its evolutionary importance. Now is the time to unleash your inner Indiana Jones and help the scientific community expand its knowledge of Cretaceous creatures.